Hi, I'm Steven. That's Tiffany. That's Erock. We're from Just Got Played, and we are continuing our Cult of the New series. So what do we mean by Cult of the New? Well, specifically for these videos, we mean games that have been published in the last 5 years. So I asked some of our crew from the channel and some of our channel members, which, you can hit the little button down there to become a channel member if you want, if you're interested in participating in these things. But I said, hey, submit a ranked list for up to 50 games that are your favorites from the past 5 years. And I'm going to collect all those together. We're going to make a big list of the top 25 based on those. And we're just going to go through them. And today we're bringing you numbers 18 through number 11. And I will say that every game on this list was on 3 or 4 separate lists. We're going to be getting into the 4s at this point. And they're from several different years here. So let's just jump into it, all right? And we will jump into it with number 18. I'm going to throw it over to Tiffany to talk a little bit about a relatively new game, My Father's Work.
All right. So My Father's Work. This definitely speaks to the spooky in my soul. It is a really creepy, really cool game where you are continuing the work of your mad scientist father or grandfather or great-grandfather, as it were, or great-grandmother. Like you can pick to have matriarchs as the leaders of your family if you want to, and you do you. I'm not judging. But what you do in this game is you, over series of generations, you are picking experiments and projects that you're working on as a mad scientist, and you are going to town, getting resources, trying to actualize your father's work, make discoveries and advancements in this spooky field of creepydom. And you are just trying to achieve these things by the last generation. Each generation, you I don't remember exactly, but it's something like you lose everything that you've built up except for like foundational level things. So each generation you kind of get wiped back down and you have to kind of start over, with the exception of the like really like foundational things that you kind of established that you have left. And so you try to rebuild each generation. And I think it's 3 or 4 generations that you go through, maybe 4. And that by the end of the game, you're trying to achieve these cards. There are like level A, level B, level C things, and you need like 2 level A's accomplished in order to do this next like level B or whatever. And so they kind of build or scaffold on each other, and you build up your achievements gradually that way. But it's really cool. It's got great components. It's going to take you 3 hours or so to play this game. It's a long game, but it is a lot of fun. It's quite spooky. It's, that macabre feel or theme to it, which is one of my favorites. But yeah, My Father's Work is a ton of fun if you like worker placements, if you like that engine building, if you like working towards a goal of just trying to build up the spookiest empire that you can. So it's a lot of fun. My Father's Work.
Yeah, admit it. You just like the fancy bits.
I do love the fancy bits. We filled all of our little vials with different materials and stuff, so they all look like weird, like science experiment type stuff. And I love playing that game.
Nice. I need to party at your house. All right. So My Father's Work was number 18. So let's move on to number 17. And so I will tell you about, from 2019, Tiny Towns. So Tiny Towns is an interesting game. It's a simultaneous play game where everybody has their own little grid map where they're trying to build their own town. So there are these different cards out that say, what do these different buildings do? Essentially, usually how they score. Some of them combo off each other. Some of them, they just say they have to be placed in some sort of pattern or away from each other or next to each other, whatever it is. And there's a variety in the game. So, you can have a different variety of buildings to sort of mix it up when you play. But essentially, the way the game plays, and there's really 2 ways to play it, every turn you're going to get a resource cube, whether it's a wood or a brick or a glass or whatever the yellow thing is, or a stone, and you're going to put one of those cubes on your mat. And then at any point, if your arrangement of the cubes matches the polyomino shape of one of the buildings, you can take those cubes and turn it into a building. The building has to go into one of the spaces that one of the cubes was from, and then you put the building there, and then it frees up those other spaces. So that's nice because it does start to get sort of crowded on your board. I say there's two different ways to play this game because one way to play it is there's a deck of cards, and you turn it over, and it tells you what resource that you're supposed to put down. And I think every third one you get to choose which resource you're going to play. Or the other, and that's really a variant, I think, because the main way to play the game is whoever's turn it is, who has that little hammer, they call the resource that everybody has to put down. And that could be mean. So you could specifically call out resources, to sort of screw your opponents if you're sort of paying attention to what's going on. But so you can play it with the cards, or you could play it by calling out the resource. Seems like you guys prefer to play with the calling out the resource. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
My group, we actually usually play with the cards. But I've combined 2 copies of the sets too, so we can play with up to like 12 people. But at that point, you really probably need to be using the cards versus the calling out. But anyway, it's an interesting puzzle. There's a little polyomino sort of thing going on. It's not polyomino in the sense you're trying to get polyomino shapes to fit together. It's polyomino in the sense you're trying to match a polyomino pattern on the cards. But it's an interesting puzzle. What am I going to try to build? How am I going to try to score effectively? And how am I going to deal with getting rid of the resources I didn't want, or not in the order I wanted them, or something like that, right? So it's just one of those games where you have a plan, but you got to roll with the punches because, things are just not going to go the way you want them to go. So if that sounds interesting to you, it's quick, it's simultaneous play. Check it out. That is our number 17, which is Tiny Towns. Now, that is sort of on the lighter end of the spectrum. I haven't played the next game on our list, but I think it's sort of on the other end of the spectrum. I'm going to throw it over to Erock to talk about another fairly recent game from 2022. Number 16 on the list is Mosaic.
Yes, Mosaic. This was relatively high on, I know, me and Babe's list. This is a fairly new game as far as it goes, but I've had a lot of fun every time I've played this game. It is probably way bigger than it needs to be. It is probably way overproduced. We have the Colossus edition, so like everybody has a tub of units and cities and all this stuff to put out on, that you can put out on this big old map that takes up a big old table space. And the general gist of the game is that basically it's a civilization game, but it's really kind of loose and abstract as far as it goes, because you have basically a map of the Mediterranean, but you can literally place anywhere at any time. Like you're like, I'm going to build a city in Egypt. And then the next turn, you're like, I'm going to build a city in France. And because that's just kind of the way the game goes. So it's not really like stringent civilization style, but at the same time, you are kind of building up a civilization over this broad area, as it were. The game plays a lot like games like Terraforming Mars and something else with tags, Arc Nova, where it counts, it has a lot to do with these tags that are going on in the game, mostly for scoring purposes. There's a couple of cards that are like, you need a certain couple of tags before you can play the card, but that's incredibly minor. It's mostly for scoring purposes. There's like 2 different kind of things going on in the game, one of which is kind of this area control over the map, which may score anywhere from 1 to 3 times during the game. And there's also this other whole set of objectives, like achievements and golden ages, and you can build wonders. So, and that's entirely separate from the area control aspect of the game. So you can kind of like delve into one and ignore the other one, or kind of dabble in both. And it all seems pretty viable. It seems to me that the best tactician or strategist, however you want to look at it for this game, because it's really, I think it's more tactician in this, because you're drawing a lot of cards and you're kind of playing off that stuff. You do have a lot of freedom in what you can do, but there's a lot of things you can do without using a card, but you're way better off using a card. So it kind of like points you in that direction as you play. So you kind of do the best you can with what's available at the time. But anyway, I digress. It's a giant game. I have a giant explanation for a very small amount of time. But it's really cool. Like I said, you do all these different things. There's a set of achievements that comes out every game. And when two of the achievements, the golden ages or the wonders are all gone, that's going to signal the end of the game. The other way the game can end is there is a scoring card in each of the decks of the game. So there's like a deck for population, a deck for, cities and towns and stuff. There's a deck for technology. There's a deck for taxation. So all these decks have an end game scoring card in them, and you seed them low in these decks. So the other end game condition is when the third scoring card comes out. So depending upon how fast you build the wonders and get the achievements and stuff, it really changes how the game is going to be scored. I think that's really interesting, because in most games, you know how the game is going to be scored. It's not a mystery. You know what I'm saying? In this game, you're not really sure, because you could lean real heavy into the area control, and then everybody just gets all the achievements and stuff real quick, and you only end up scoring the game once or twice. Whereas you could go the other way and kind of just leave it alone, and then ends up being 3 times the area control gets scored, and you didn't get any points that way. So there's a whole lot of variance and variability in not only the way that you can play it, but the way that it plays itself out. So I really like Mosaic. It's kind of a surprise hit for me. I thought it was going to be one of those. It was like, yeah, it was fun. It's way overproduced, yada, yada. But I really like the gameplay of this game. So Mosaic.
Yeah. And if you want to see the big sprawling game, Erock did a unboxing video for Mosaic. So that's on the channel. Look out for that. This was Glenn Drover, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
he's known for those Mediterranean civilization games.
Yeah,
so.
no stranger to those civilization games. So yeah, he can keep taking a crack at this one, right? Keep making new ones. We'll play them. They'll get better each time, right? Yeah. All right, cool. Well, that was number 16, Mosaic. I'm going to move on to number 15 now. Number 15 is a game that, gosh, it's interesting because I almost feel like I would always rather play this game instead of Seven Wonders. And that is It's a Wonderful World. So I really like It's a Wonderful World because, well, it's got the drafting thing. It's got multi-use cards. And it's got a little bit of engine building going on. So, you're drafting these cards and you have to decide if you're going to use this card, you're going to discard it for the resources that are on the card, or if you're going to put that card into production, because essentially everything's, a building. And you want to get those things built because then you tuck them over under your empire and they give you something. Well, most of them give you something every round. They also give you points for scoring or combos for point scoring, which is even more important. So I like that decision. You'll be looking at a bunch of cards and you're like, I want to build this. I want to build this. I want to build it. Well, I can't build all those things. Maybe I'll try to build this. And so, now I just got to find a card that has some, that I can discard to get some blue cubes to help build this thing. And then, oh, by the way, that's great because the next person in draft order for me is trying to collect those cards that, hey, I know Erock wants this card and I can discard it and get some blue cubes. Yay. So there's that thing going on, paying attention to what's going on around you, interacting with people that way. But then also when it comes time to produce, all the resources are sort of produced in order. So, gray, black, blue, yellow, green. I can't remember the order specifically, but you produce them in order. And if you are the highest production, you get some reward for doing that. You might get these general tokens or these financier tokens, which sometimes you can spend for something, but usually they're just related to scoring points at the end of the game, if you combo off that. There's just a lot of interesting stuff going on, but it's really very simple, I think. I mean, I've taught the game before pretty quickly, and everybody, sort of grasps it. They all grasp how to play. They don't necessarily grasp how to win until after the first game. But, if you like drafting games and you like a little bit of that engine building, I would say check this one out It's that, I don't know what the cubes are, green, yellow, whatever. So how strong is the theme? I don't know, but the artwork is good, so.
Well, I'm going to chime in here for a minute because I really, really like this game a lot. There is either no theme at all in this game, or it is chock full of theme. It really depends on you. You know what I'm saying? Because really, you can just look at this game about cubes and building stuff and things like that. But if you actually look at what it's representing and the names of the stuff on the cards and stuff, it actually is incredibly thematic, but you kind of have to get yourself there. The game is not going to get you there. You have to willingly be like, oh, I get it. I'm getting UFOs now because of the progression of the things that I got up to this thing, so I just want to say my favorite part of this game is the progressive production. I think it's absolutely fantastic because, like you said, it goes in order. So if I need grays to build a black building, gray produces first. So I can set myself up to produce the thing, to build the thing that's going to produce in the next cycle. That is excellent. That is probably easily my favorite part of this game. I like drafting. I like the engine, but man, that progressive production is fantastic.
And as a corollary to that, when you teach this game, you're like, yeah, you draft these cards, you discard some to get resources, and then you put some into production, and there's only 4 rounds, and people are like, well, how do you get anything done in 4 rounds? You start at the beginning and you're like, nothing, and then it just snowballs so quickly.
Yeah.
And by the end of that last round, you're like, bam, 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 doing a ton of things, ton of resources and buildings. And yeah, it's, I like things like that snowball. It's just fun for me, to go from nothing to tons of stuff in not very long. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, that is number 15. It's a Wonderful World. That is the last game on the list that was only on 3 lists. So everything we talked
more
about,
people need to play it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. In fact, knowing some people, I'm surprised it wasn't on more than 3 lists. But first time I played this was actually with John on a cruise, on a gaming cruise. And then I went back to my cabin and immediately traded for a copy of it on my phone while in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. But anyway, so every game after this one is on 4 or more lists. So the first one that is on 4 lists, but I guess not high enough on all those lists to push it higher up the list, is number 14, Nemesis. So I will throw that back over to Erock, but it's also worth noting that this is a 2018 title. So when we do this list again next year, it won't be eligible. It will have to drop off the list. It won't be Cult of the New anymore.
It'll just be old. That's just sad. Yes, Nemesis. I like this game a lot. I am kind of a heavy Euro thinky, get really into the mechanisms and figure out the guts of a game kind of a guy. This is not that game. This is aliens on a ship, and you're probably going to die at some point. This is that game. It is Aliens, the movies franchise entirely without the actual IP. But I mean, as soon as you sit down and play, you're like, oh, I get it. It's Alien. Right. You're on a ship. The ship is headed back to Earth, presumably. And you may want to kill the alien and make sure it doesn't get to Earth. You may work for the corporation and want that alien to make it back there. You don't know. You don't know what your intent is until you're dealt the cards to see what your win conditions are. And that could be very nice and happy things for everybody. And it could be very nasty things for everybody. You don't really get a choice in that. It's just you're like dropped into the persona of this person that you're playing in this game, and you have to fulfill their motivations. You know what I'm saying? But that brings up, really interesting plays, because it's going to look like and it's going to feel like a co-op because you're on this ship together and there's aliens. It is not a co-op. Okay. Everybody is out for themselves. All right. That's the game. It may so happen that you and your buddy have the same intentions because it aligns to what you're doing, but they're not your friend. They just happen to align with what you're doing here. And it makes for some really interesting, it's almost like social deduction, the complicated board game, a little bit, because you kind of try to figure out what other people are trying to do. And most of the time, you're all collectively just trying to stay alive anyway. So there's very little things that you can do. Like, for instance, your objective might be to kill player B, but you can't actually do that. You can't attack another player. So you have to kind of maneuver the situation to ways in which they're probably going to die. You know what I'm saying? Like, get in a big fight and then run away and leave them to do the fight, or other various things, nefarious things that you can do to kind of set them up into bad positions. And, you know, like I said, some people are trying to get it back to Earth. Some people aren't. So, you know, somebody goes and checks the navigation and says, yep, we're on our way to Earth. But how do you know they're not lying to you? They might be headed out into deep space because that's what they're supposed to be doing. The only way to know is to go check yourself. But, you know, that's a whole other hour of walking up there to go through the aliens just to check somebody else what they're doing. The game is tension in a nutshell that lasts for like 3 hours. It is thematically glorious. I have a great time every time I play it. There's always some kind of story that comes out of the game that you remember. Months down the road, you're like, remember that time that you had a chance to get off on the escape pod, but you didn't? Because, you know, Babe was also trying to get in the escape pod. So you waited for her. And then the alien showed up and you got kicked out. And then she got in, then the alien showed up and she got kicked out. And this happened like 2 or 3 more times until she eventually was like, never mind, screw it, I'm running away. And then you died. Like, things like that happen in this game. So I'm just saying, you know, this is one of the most thematic games I've played in a long, long time. It's almost throwback in how thematic it is. It's like playing games when I was a kid. Like, I don't mean like 5, but when I was like, you know, 16, 17 years old and everything felt like a movie, like this feels like a movie when you're playing it. It's glorious.
Okay. I'm going to play your description of that game for my kids and count how many times they go, ooh, that's sus, bro.
Yes. Yes, that is indeed sus, bro. Yes.
All right. I'm not going to play the game with them, though, because they cannot sit still for 3 hours. All right. Well, that is number 14. Yeah. Eventually, maybe they'll grow up and get a job and get out of my house. I mean, play games with me.
And come over and play a game every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That was number 14, Nemesis. So we're going to move on to number 13. And you know what? I just like hearing Erock talk. Those dulcet tones. So I'm going to throw it back to Erock to tell me about this completely abstract, themeless game that I've never played called Nova Luna.
Excellent. Well, just in case you're new to watching us, I also like to hear Erock talk. So I'll be happy to talk about Nova Luna. So I'm going to start off with a very brief introduction of the game itself. Nova Luna is actually a combination of 2 other games. One of which is by Corné van Moorsel, and that is called Habitats. And I have loved Habitats for a long time. That's a really cool game. It's basically a tile layer in which you kind of like, you're given expectations, let's say, of what needs to be next to other things. Like, I'm going to make all this up, but like if you get a baboon, maybe that baboon needs to be next to like 3 fields and a water. But these are also other animal tiles. So I might get a gazelle and I'll put him next to the baboon. And that fulfills one of his fields or whatever, but the gazelle needs like 2 rocks and a water. So all this needs to kind of interconnect on your board to fulfill these individual conditions on each one of the tiles that you lay. It's really cool. It's a little bit long for what it is. I don't personally think so, but there are shorter versions of this kind of a thing. So it is a bit of an investment to play Habitats, which I'm happy to do. I really love the game. And then there's also a game called Patchwork, which most people around the hobby have at least heard of. And that's by the famous Uwe. And Uwe played, I guess, Habitats and got in touch with Corné van Moorsel and was like, I really like your game. I want to mess with it. And, you know, I'm sure the conversation was probably something like, oh, okay, Uwe. And so he did, and he kind of meshed these 2 games together and came up with a game called Nova Luna. So the process of what you're trying to do here is from Habitats, but it's stripped down. Instead of it being like animals and habitats and whatever, each tile is just a color, and it has a couple of things on it that need to be attached to it also colors. So I might play a blue that has 3 different objectives on it. It's like, I need to be connected to 1 yellow, I need to be connected to 2 yellows, and I need to be connected to 3 oranges. And and you can chain it out. So like one area of like yellow counts for all of those if one of them is touching the thing. All right. So that's how you play this game. And what he did was combine that with the way that you take your turn in Patchwork, which is like a circle. And you get to choose something that's like 3 spaces ahead of you and then move the thing to that spot. So it really sped that part of the game up as far as, choosing what's going on and all of that. And I think they cut down a lot of the volume of it to make this combination game. But I think the combination game is fantastic. I don't think any of them necessarily replace each other as far as it goes. I still enjoy Habitats when I really just want to play like a relaxed kind of longer game of, kind of peaceful tile laying. And, Patchwork is its own thing going on. If I want a 2-player game that's a lot of fun and polyomino, I want to play that. And then meanwhile, Nova Luna exists in the middle of them, which is kind of like almost light kind of a game. But it's incredibly accessible. Without all the theme there, it's really easy to teach it. You know what I'm saying? It's so much easier to say, look, see how this one is orange and it wants 3 blues? You have to have 3 blues that touch it. Somehow that is way easier to get across than, all right, well, your baboon needs a field and 2 waters. The shark comes in a water, but he also needs a field. Like somehow just stripping all that off made it really easy to teach and digest. We play this at the drop of a hat. It does not take very long at all. It's not a quick game. I'd say, what do you think? 45 minutes maybe?
5 minutes to an hour, depending on
something like that, which for us is an incredibly short game.
That's quick. Yeah.
But we really like Nova Luna. I think the main concept of it is just really solid. And it's a nice, light, fast game. Yay.
All right, cool. I'm always up for a nice, light, fast game. Although I think I probably would like it thematic, if it were thematic rather than just colors. But, I'd give it a shot. There are plenty of abstract games I play. All right. So, we're basically halfway through the list now, since that was number 13. And I have to say, the games that we've talked about up to this point, 13 through 25, some of them I was just pleasantly surprised, or I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good pick. That's nice. But these next 2, number 12 and 11, I have to tell you, I got to say, I am surprised they were not in the top 10 or top 5. So these are games that have received a lot of attention over the last few years, won a lot of awards, and sold many, many copies. So I was expecting more from them, but we'll start with number 12 is The Quacks of Quedlinburg. This is another 2018 title, so it's going to fall off the list next year when we do this again. But The Quacks of Quedlinburg has had a couple of expansions at least, and maybe 3 now. I don't know. But who knows? It is essentially a push your luck game. And thematically, you are a quack and you're making this potion, and you're just trying to make essentially the most valuable potion without it blowing up in your face. And so what do? You draw ingredients out of a bag, and then you place the ingredients in your pot. And if you, they're called cherry bombs or something, the little cherry blossom things. And if you get enough of those higher than value 7 in your pot, it explodes. So, in the beginning, you're just drawing stuff out of your bag and putting it down because you're not really at risk of exploding. And you want to move further and further and further around in your pot. And there's lots of different ingredients you have in your pot that can help you in different ways or get you different advantages, like getting you rubies or something that lets you do some stuff. But eventually you get to that point where you're like, oh, okay, now I have to decide, am I going to draw from my bag or stop? And if you stop, you get 2 things. You get however far along you've gotten in your pot, you get the points for that. And you also get purchasing power to buy new ingredients to put in your bag. You can put 2 new ingredients at most, 1 or 2 in your bag every round. And they can't be the same either. But if you if you decide, well, I'm going to draw, and you draw the thing that busts you, now you have to decide, am I going to take the points or am I going to take the funds to buy ingredients to put in my pot? So I know some people who will just strategically bust in the first round because the points are so low, not very many points. And they're trying to get to some target. Like, well, I need to make sure I get to at least 10 money so I can buy the, whatever, the 2 blue or whatever it is that I'm trying, to get ingredient. And so they're just like, and I don't care if I bust to get there, And so there's a lot of interesting sort of meta play that goes on with that, I guess. It's simultaneous play in that everybody's just simultaneously drawing from their bag and putting their stuff down, assuming you can trust the people that you're playing with. Maybe you might want to take a look at what your 8 or 9 year olds are doing sometimes, drawing those ingredients out of the bag. But, otherwise it's a pretty fast game when everybody's just sort of going at their own pace to push their pot and go. And, I think it's it basically boils down to, do you like push your luck or not? Right? Because you are going to have a play of this game that is just bad, where your pot just blows up on you left and right when you got nothing, and you lose and you get creamed. But it was fast, and hopefully you had fun doing that anyway. But if that bugs you, like I know some people that bugs the heck out of them when just bad luck ruins their game. I guess I shouldn't say ruin. Bad luck causes them to lose badly, because that doesn't ruin a game for me. I think that's hilarious sometimes when that happens to me. So if that is not your bag, see what I did there. Anyway, if that's not your thing, this is not the game for you, right? It is basically, do you like push your luck or not? Well, this is a great push your luck game. If you do. I bought the first expansion, the Herb Witches, because it added a 5th player. Yeah, I think the 5th, right? Yeah. And I don't have the next expansion past that. And I don't know if there's more past that. But, there's a lot of different stuff. There's a lot of different variety in the ingredients. You can change up the sets of ingredients you're playing with each game so that, can keep it fresh. But when this game came out, it was all the rage and people still talk about it. Probably won some awards. I don't know. That is the Quacks of Quedlinburg, and that is our number 12. And I expected it to be higher, but the next game, our number 11, is higher. It's 11 instead of 12, but I expected this to be way up there, because anytime you make a list that is just an aggregation of people's picks, you always expect Wingspan to be way up at the top, but it did not crack our top 10. So it's garbage. Everything that's not in the top 10 is garbage, right? I mean, come on, just garbage. No. All right. So number 11 is 2019's Wingspan, and Tiffany kicked us off in this video. So I'm going to have her see us out as well by telling us all about Wingspan.
All right. So Wingspan is a really fun action selection game where you are, you've got a board in front of you, and it's got 3 different rows, and each of those, well, I guess it's 4. Each of those rows is a different action that you can take. You can either play birds to your hand, you can take food from the bird feeder, you can take cards from the card deck, or you can
lay eggs.
Yeah. And so you choose one of those actions on your turn. That's all you do. You pick one action, you do that thing. And then it's somebody else's turn, and they get to do their one action. And you go through a series of 3 rounds, 3 or 4 rounds. I think it's 3 though. And each round has its own objectives that it's scoring. Or its own singular objective that it's scoring. So for round 1, you might at the end of the round be counting up all of the birds with stick nests that have eggs. And so you're looking at the iconography on your card as you play, and you're like, okay, note to self, I'm trying to play stick nests, and I'm trying to lay eggs in those nests so that at the end of the first round, I can score as many of those as I can. Or maybe you're going to forego that one this time because you're trying to build up to have an epic turn 2 and turn 3, because you can see the objectives beforehand. You know, moving forward, what all of the objectives in the future, the rest of the game are going to be. And so you just take your turns playing cards or taking resources or laying eggs or doing whatever, and you're just trying to accumulate as many points as you can. That it's definitely, in my experience anyway, it's definitely one of those games where you don't really know who's going to win until the end when scoring is done, because so many points come from different avenues. You might have cards tucked underneath your birds and you're scoring points for those, or you might be scoring points for all of the predatory birds that you have in your tableau, or you like just different things give you've got your own secret win conditions, or not win conditions, but your secret scoring objectives that you're trying to go after, in addition to the public scoring objectives that you're competing with your, like, everybody else for. It was just a lot of fun, and it's a nice, like, relaxing game, because you're just like, I'm gonna play the warbled-nosed woodpecker, and I'm like in my plains lane, but like, so it's just like this super chill game where you're just playing these silly birds, and they've got, like, each card has its own information, like flavor text, tidbits about birds. So it's really informational and really cool. But yeah, like it's just a lot of fun. It's a super chill game. It's an average length game, I would say. It's not really long. It's just like, it's your average 1.5 to 2 hours. They do have it online. We play on Steam a lot, which I think takes it to, like, this other zen level, because then you've got, like, it plays the sounds of the birds chirping,
And
like,
the narrator. Yeah.
Yes. She's got, like, some kind of accent.
It's like, the red-headed woodpecker loves to peck on oak trees near lakes. You're like, oh, that's nice.
Oh, nice. Like, we're not bird people, but I love wings. Like, I'll learn all about birds during Wingspan. I don't care. But it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to spend an hour and a half. And it's wildly popular. Like, a lot of people really love this game. It's a solid game. So definitely,
it is a really solid game. I agree.
Yeah, definitely one worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. This made the list from popular, top games from the last 5 years. I like one of the things I like about Wingspan is that it you lose an action every round, right? So you start off and, like, maybe you have 8, and then the second round you have 7 and 6 and then 5 or whatever. I think that's pretty cool, because as you build up your engine, you got a lot of stuff going on. So then having less actions, it sort of speeds the game along. And
no, I agree 100%. I think that's one of the best things about the game, because it does keep the length under control. Because most engine building games like Wingspan, it gets longer as you go. The first turn you do almost nothing, and the last turn takes 2 hours because you built this giant engine up. But this is a nice way of keeping that under control, because you're right. Because at the beginning you have all these actions and nothing to do with them, and at the end everything you do triggers like 4 other things. So you knock down on the actions, and knocks down on the time at the end. I think it's genius.
Yeah, I do find the ending a little anticlimactic, because you don't have that many actions in the last round. So I'm just like, I'm going to lay eggs with.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of egg laying in the last round.
But of course, I've only played the base game with the base birds too. I think if you get some of the other expansions with the different birds, it's maybe a different experience, at least in that regard. I don't know.
Definitely adds a variety, the different birds that because they added some different mechanisms in, so that it like the game just operates a little differently. For instance, with some of the expansion birds, one of the weird things was it's a series of just columns and rows, and you play a card in your chosen column in the first row, and then the next time you play a bird in that row, you go the second column, and then the third column, and you work from left to right. And then when you choose that action, you're done playing. I've played 3 birds in a row, say, and now I'm going to take the take food action. Well, I've just played 3 cards in that row, which powers up that action. And so now I'm taking a bigger action. I'm getting more for that action instead of just the level 1 power for it. So it's really so cool. I love it. It's really interesting.
I think and like in the European one, some of the birds you play sideways.
That's
so
what I meant to say.
Cover,
yeah,
that's where you were building to, right? Exactly.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
You place a bird sideways, so it actually covers 2 spots that way instead of just 1 spot.
I see. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think as long as they still have the birds, I love the predatory birds that when you activate them, you draw a card and are you?
Yeah, it's awesome.
My bird
It's
can
under
eat
a
that.
certain size, it eats.
Yeah,
Them.
yeah.
That's
Exactly. That's my favorite thing to do in the game. Eat other birds. All right. Well, there you go. That is numbers 11 through 18. We will be back next time with our last video, which is the top 10. Top 10 Cult of the New best games from the last 5 years. But until then, I'm Steven. That's Tiffany. That's Erock. We're from Just Got Played. If you want to come talk to us about board games, look in the description below. There is a link to our Discord channel. We'll be happy to talk to you about these games or any other games or whatever. And again, if you hit that join button, you'll actually have a chance to contribute to these lists in the future.
Yes,
all right.
Add your voice to the fray.
Indeed. All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
See you next time.